All right, everyone. Thank you for coming and welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is called Mastering the Session Cycle, which is a super uncatchy thing. In fact, I don't think anyone uses the phrase session cycle, maybe. It's quite frankly one that I invented. But what I'm talking about is the before, during, and after. Most coaching relationships have something of a cadence of we talk on a regular interval. And so, between sessions, there's a lot of space and, there's, elements of doing good prep, doing good setup during the session, and doing good post-wrap for them so that things are set in motion to really support your clients during that time between those sessions. Voila, my clunky title, The Session Cycle. So you probably have and are familiar with and frankly got most of your training in doing the actual session. I'm not too deep into it, but last time I checked, all 11 core competencies of a great coach at all the levels, even the master level, every single one of those competencies are fully contained within what happens during that weekly or monthly session that you have. When you're actually face-to-face or on a Zoom call or on the phone, when you're interacting directly in real time with your clients, that's it. That's so many disciplines of coaching have everything to do with, well, what do you say, what do you do, what do you create during that session? But there's in the notion of a cycle where, again, you're in that cadence of talking on a regular basis. There's, you've got your post, which is, whatever happens afterwards, wrapping up, reflecting, all that. There's the space in the middle in between where life can come up and your clients are doing whatever they're doing. Hopefully they're applying the coaching and following through on their action plans, but who knows? And then the sort of pre where it's like, okay, the next session is coming up. What kind of preparation comes in? What sort of ways to be prepared and ready to make the most of that actual session? In those sessions, independent of CoachAccountable, we can largely say often that these kind of consist of some modalities. There's often the looking back that the session might begin with, review on actions and check in on metrics. Now, arguably, actions and metrics are pretty CoachAccountable centric concepts, but this does generalize as well. What did you say you were going to do? How would you apply this coaching to your life? Those are, actions in the broader sense. And then metrics, well, what are we measuring? What sort of goals or results are we trying to go for? So it's CoachAccountable centric and yet not very generalizable. And then on the tail end of a session, there is the creating moving forward. There's making that action plan or sort of defining, what should we cancel? What should we change the due date for? What new items should we add? Setting up metrics that might be tuning ones that are already in progress or defining certain things that are worth measuring going forward, or perhaps tuning the targets in case something's not plausible, but make sure it's on the right track. And then even the more pedestrian administrative elements of confirming the next session. Oftentimes you'll be in a cadence, we talk on Tuesdays at 10 and you might just say like, next Tuesday at 10, good for you? Yeah, it's great. Or actually, no, I got a dental appointment. Can we move it back an hour? Whatever, these little basics. Those are kind of the things, the sort of administrative things that constitute that teeing up of what's going to happen, during a session and how's it going to go in the space between until next session. What you'll notice about this diagram is there's an awful lot more time that happens in the space between than the time during. Of course, this diagram, it's not to scale, but you get the gist. Your clients, they don't live for your sessions. They've got their real life. They've got things that are going on in their life as they go ye forth once you hang up the phone. And so what they do can be a crapshoot. And yet all this space in between here, this is where the rubber meets the road. The actual results of coaching are what happens outside of those sessions and inside of their actual lives, where they apply what they learned, they take action on what they've distinguished as important with you. So that this arc of the whole cycle might not be part of your training is, I want you to consider that as a real ripe fodder for really upping your game as a coach in terms of what you can provide. As you listen, I want you to challenge these ideas. This is a very opinionated look. As I already said, there are coaching disciplines that have everything to do about what happens during the session and nothing to do about the space in between. So I want you to sort of be there and ask yourself some questions as we go. How does this map onto my style? Does it fit? Does it not? Where doesn't it fit? Be interested in and sort of thinking about, well, that actually might not apply, and be, be open to knowing that this is, a lot of optional ideas. I'm kind of throwing everything that, we at Coach Accountable Labs have distinguished as worth doing. They may or may not apply, but most importantly, where could it? These ideas that I'm throwing your way, get interested in, well, if I've never done this before, maybe I could, and maybe it would be useful. And in addition, like I said, before we started recording, don't just ask yourself, please ask us. Please feel free at any time to unmute yourself and pop in with a question or comment, or a, hey, yeah, but, or hey, John, that sounds great, but that sounds like a real pain in the butt, whatever. I want to sort of engage and challenge, your concept of what you should be as a coach, in terms of what you can do outside of that session. To tee this up, let's take some lessons from advertisers about getting ideas to sink in. So this is sort of a dated thing, but I think everyone on this line is old enough to remember before we had video on demand and Netflix, where you could just watch whatever whenever you want. You had half-hour blocks or hour-long blocks, and during those programs, you had regular intervals of commercial breaks. And I don't know about you, but as a kid, I would often find it weird and or frustrating when I saw the same commercial that I saw the last commercial break during the same show. There was this feeling of like, wait, that must be a programming error. Like, why is there a rerun on television that was just of an episode that just ran 10 minutes ago? Well, it's not a fluke. That's very intentional, actually. When it comes to getting a message into one's mind, multiple exposures is actually very handy, and advertisers know this. A lot of behavioral psychology and cognitive psychology has a lot to say about, the first exposure to an idea barely registers on your subconscious. The second or third time is when your subconscious sort of lets it bubble up to the conscious and say, hey, this keeps coming up. Maybe it's important, pay attention. Advertisers know this, and so that's why you get that sort of multiple exposure. And similarly, you can also have commercials that are for the same product, but different variations of it. All nicely in a row. That varied exposure also sort of reduces the sort of pattern recognition fatigue and makes it like, oh, I'm now considering a similar angle or a similar idea, but from a different angle, so I pay attention to it newly. These two things are techniques that advertisers use all the time when it comes to letting ideas sink in. And we as coaches are in the business, quite frankly, of getting ideas to sink in, whether it's something that we're trying to impart as managers, mentors, or, or more of the coaching, get out of the way and let them explore. They're still distinguishing ideas about, what's going to be useful. And by its very nature, they're new, they're challenging. And so it might take something for them to sink in. So does anyone want to kind of like guess about how this is relevant to what we're talking about with the session cycle and just focusing on the session and nothing else? I'm tempted to offer a $10 credit to anyone who speaks up, but we'll save that for later.
Yeah, this is William. I'll just say that when learning to use this new system, you're going to have to try it multiple times before it may start to feel comfortable.
That's a very good one. You're right. There's the learning curve of anything, but what I'm speaking about more generally is actually bigger than just the Coach Accountable realm, but coaching as a whole. When all your coaching is just the session, that's basically one time that you have to sort of impart upon any new ideas. And then it's go ye forth, good luck, I hope this works, and I hope you remember it and carry it forth until we talk next time. And what I'm sort of proposing is by providing a better cycle amounts to giving them more touch points of the same ideas so that they can sink in. A little bit of repetition, but also a little bit of varied, and some ways for them to be actively engaged, so that the very ideas of coaching themselves, and not just Coach Accountable, to your point, William, is getting in. It's sort of seeping in as new ideas that they can apply.
One of the things that I've been doing really successfully is recording short videos about a topic that we just covered. And so, for example, I do a lot of coaching around emotional intelligence. So I have a couple of quick videos, and I'll just upload it in between sessions into their as a file, and getting really good feedback from sharing those videos. And some of them I put into a worksheet as well with a couple very simple recap questions or how is this going to impact you. So
brilliant.
It's wonderful to be able to do that through the system, through the platform.
Well done. Yeah, it sounds like you might have sort of a library of those clips, and then whichever ones are appropriate based on what you talk about, that's the one that you
building them, and a lot of the new ones come from a particular coaching session that spawned an idea, that then I will record something short about it and share it.
And then you've got it, part of your stock. So when that same idea comes up with a different client another day, brilliant. Well done. Absolutely.
I don't personalize the videos. I don't say, hey, John, here's the video we just talked about. So
right on.
Very generic.
Excellent. That's really well played. Good. So yeah, let's look into.
Wait, did I get my $10 credit? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I feel bad because I kind of floated it as a maybe, and then we spoke up in the near. So I don't know. It would be a tie or what do we do? We'll do it later. So let's talk about providing a better cycle. Hopefully again that notion of a session cycle is starting to make sense as a sort of clunky term. I want to start with, when I talk about providing a better cycle, not much work. In an earlier draft of this slide, I put not much work as sort of like a rider at the tail end of the list, because it's just like, hey, also this is not going to take much work. But then I realized you guys might want to actually know that right up front, so that you don't view what I'm about to say with cynicism, and a very justified cynicism, as in, well, Larson, that's easy for you to say. You're basically telling us to be better coaches, we should just work harder and put more hours in. That's not what I'm talking about, and I want to make that abundantly clear right up front. It's important that for this system, CoachAccountable, to be valuable and a real win for you guys, that you can actually give your clients a lot more, but have your time massively leveraged. So,
John, an observation from Peter.
Yes.
Absolutely, not much work for clients as well. The huge challenge with busy people to enable them to make all the progress that they want to with least effort. And of course they're going to have to put some work in to enable to achieve the results, but not much work for all stakeholders.
Touche. That's a good point. I take somewhat exception to that because, like you said, put the work in order to get the results out. So you're absolutely right that there has to be a leveraging, so we're really respectful of the time and make it really clear and to the point and easy to use. But I will, in distinguishing the session cycle, basically provide opportunities for their sort of to up their participation, which may be a euphemism for work, but it really is an opportunity for them to really participate and feel like they're getting more of what they came from, and spending those minutes to do that work will be more than worth their time. It's a great point. All right, so providing a better cycle, not much work is our caveat. We want to talk about more touch points. So again, it's not just, here's a whole host of ideas. It was lovely to talk to you. I'll talk to you again in a month. But actual more exposures to those things that they're getting so that they can sink in for the lessons of advertisers. Varied touch points. This isn't a matter of, creating some session notes and then just emailing them at regular intervals where they might get bored, where they might feel like, well, yeah, I know that. Again, that sort of repetition has it fade into the background and no longer worth paying attention to. So varied touch points makes a better cycle. Touch points that are encouraging. The human element of being a coach who actually cares about what's going on here, to be on the receiving end of that cycle, can be a huge boon to motivation, focus, and all that. Active engaging. So we're not talking about just providing people touch points to passively consume or consume again various information and insights. We want to give them opportunities to sort of, what I just said to Peter, generate their participation. Just a little more work, but it'll have the forebrain firing and have them sort of actually map it on. Actively engaging with content is so much more powerful to get it in than just passively repetition. It's been done in studies a million times with people studying for tests. If you just passively read your notes over again and again and again, you will not do nearly as well for spending more time as someone who actually did certain exercises that force their brain to think and generate versus just have the content coming at them. And then finally, this is even more pedestrian, but still important, just reminding, just little taps on the shoulder. Hey, don't forget about these things we talked about. Don't forget to take action about the things you said were important. Don't forget to track this. Little reminders also will do an awful lot to serve those spaces in between the sessions. So now, easier said than done. This is sort of a tall order that I'm sort of distinguishing of giving a lot more life and interactivity on the cycle between sessions. Maybe, but let's take a look at this in detail and see how a lot of this works. A lot of it is going to be functionality that you veteran users have already used or used in part CoachAccountable, and we'll see how these things map on. So let's look at the session cycle in detail. We've got the actual session. And it again consists of, structural elements that, are sort of a field of the actual coaching, talking about their world. You do want to put in together the whole looking back, the review of how it's gone, and then moving forward, creating what's next. And then in that arc, we're kind of going to go around the various things that you can do. Now, there's going to be a lot here, but I want you to know that every one of these are sort of building blocks of how you can give your clients more. They're all optional. You wouldn't have to do every single one of these, but any sort of combination, potpourri, cafeteria style, nice way to benefit, I think. So the first one that I have here is type up and share notes. I've got a little color convention here. Red is basically coach effort. Now, I'm not trying to conflate that with like red is nature's danger color, like red alert. But I do want to sort of be respectful of, again, your time. I'm not trying to tell you guys to do all work. So I put things in red to say like, hey, coach, this is stuff you're going to have to do. And we'll see how much is not red. Green, incidentally, means things that are powered by and or automated by CoachAccountable. So typing up and sharing session notes. This may or not be something that you already do. I kind of hope it is already something that you do. If not for your own internal things alone, maybe you're just, if not sharing with your clients, maybe just for your own internal thing. Typing up notes is a really good thing to sort of get your own self organized so that when it comes around to reviewing for the next one, you're in a really good place because you know exactly what happened versus spending even more time on the weather report update of what's new since we last talked. The next element is the post-session worksheet. And the first thing is you can basically, with your appointment types, tell CoachAccountable to anytime you have an appointment, I want you to send this worksheet afterwards to my client. CoachAccountable will assign it automatically. Your client does it. Blue means client participation stuff. And commentary back and forth. So this is a really nice opportunity to, again, bring some of those bits of engagement and encouragement and active recall. If you've got, let's go look at this. If you've got a worksheet, let's go actually in declare client and sort of trace this with her. So we have session notes from the past. Say we had a session just now. You can kind of see some of the things, oh, there's a lot of clutter. Let's work on some things. Typing this up took all of 5 minutes. I know because I did it just for prepping for this webinar just now. And then actions are automatically appended. Again, this is that idea that during your sessions, by all means, make an action plan. Make some sort of real game plan called what constitutes actually acting on this coaching going forward. That's whole applying it to your life. These are automatically appended based on what was created over here. And then, so the session notes are saved. And then the system automatically sent out a worksheet.
Interrupt quick.
Yes, hey, Kimberly.
So that automatic appended thing just surprised me. Is there something I have to do that will make that automatic, or do you do the actions first and then?
Yes and no, exactly. So the idea behind the system is you create action items, either you or your client, while you're talking. Like when it's fresh in mind, great, that's an idea, put that down in your action plan, make a realistic deadline. And then when you mark session notes complete, as in you're done, type, and you say, you can save drafts, of course, but you mark them complete, the system will pick up like, oh, there were action items that happened to be created around that time. Would you like me to append them? And it will. So that's one of the benefits. That's actually a really great point, Kimberly, because yes, do make action items before marking session notes complete, because then you'll get the benefit as well as, that's the stuff of you get to co-create it with your clients, while they're on the line. Very good question. All right. So the session notes are there, they're shared. The system automatically dispatched a worksheet. And that's the session wrap up and reflection. Let me just do a quick, tactical into how this works. And if you go into appointment configuration for your appointment types, when you're setting up one of your appointment types, this is one of the default ones, the preloaded ones, but you can sort of adjust it. You've got these ability to assign pre-worksheets and post-worksheets. Everyone's account comes preloaded with the CoachAccountable pre-session check-in and session wrap-up and reflection. I highly recommend that you either use those or even better, take a look at them and be like, that's nice, but John, that's not how I would have worded that. Let me actually tailor it to my actual style and then use that. And then again, attach them to your appointments so that they'll automatically fire off. Either or both. It's all kind of up to you in terms of what's the right cadence, what's the right level of involvement for your clients, what are they expecting? And again, in this sort of survey of how to add all kinds of great stuff to the session cycle, we're gonna assume both of them are worth using, but again, you could do one or the other. So when your client does it, you get it in your email right away, which is nice and easy. Let's see here. And so I've got, as coach, I see, oh, Claire client just completed a worksheet. And I can just say like, oh, they've just completed, here we go. And I can read their answers like, very good. Oh, that's nice. I love it when they think of good ideas that sort of build upon what we talked about. And so I might just say, hit reply, because this says right here, reply above this line to add a comment. Not a whole lot of work, just a quick little, just give them some love. So as coach, we can kind of, again, get a little window into, hey, did that land for you? Did you get what we were talking about? And if I know that, I can then make a comment either way and just sort of have a little more dialogue. And it's that sensation of like someone actually cares about what I'm doing. And the mere fact that we assigned this worksheet to them is another gift, because we basically said like, hey, this is great talking to you. Talk to you next week. But we've given them automatically a nice little prompt like, hey, take some time to reflect on it. Take some time to, apply it and sort of make sure you got it. This is that active recall that has them actually, mapping it onto the lives and thinking about it some more so that they can carry it forward, not just the memory of that session. Now it's being reinforced. So, okay. Any questions about the post-session worksheet? Again, with the commentary back and forth, this can all run over standard email where it's, again, a little bit of reinforcement, re-encouragement, editorial corrections. If they totally missed part of what you really want them to carry forth, you'll know that from their having taken some time to reflect on it and say like, this is great, and don't forget about this other big part. Just so it doesn't slip off your radar, this matters. It allows you to sort of do a course correct. And coach, work for this again is just on the order of minutes, just a quick skim of what comes right into your email, and then post a comment or two. And again, you're giving your clients more. Any question about this segment of the cycle? All right, let's continue on. So after you get done with your sessions, life is happening for your client. Things are coming up, inspiration might be fading. Things that they thought important will get sidetracked by the things that'll happen. But if you set things up right and teed things up during the actual session, you've got coaching activities sprinkled in. And that's that idea of, let's go back to Claire's thing. We've got some things that we created. There are some action items, right? And these action items have reminders. Part of the great sort of skill of using CoachAccountable is if you get your own clients in the habit of making their own action plans. That means they set their own deadlines, and you encourage them to add their own reminders, things that will be timely and useful for them to do it. When they generate that level of participation of like choosing their own destiny in terms of how things will lay out pace-wise to do the work of the coaching, they won't resent it or resist it quite as much as they might if it would given on to them from on high. But instead they'll be like, oh yeah, cool, I'm glad I set myself this reminder. I can use it because it's exactly what I set for myself. So these little taps on the shoulder by way of reminders to complete the various things that are actually the part of the coaching, to get them the results they want to get out of working with you will help. If you do metrics, you can have a reminder, again, give them a tap on the shoulder, say, hey, what's your number for this week? Or hey, what's your number for today? Metrics are a topic unto themselves, but you can set up any sort of tracking on any sort of frequency or interval you want, whether it's a weekly thing, a daily thing, a weekdays thing, a bi-weekly, and so on. And these reminders will help them to actually do it. And then again, that makes it dead simple for them to sort of bring coaching into their lives, because they can report right as a reply to the email or text if they're in North America and have a cell phone on file. That again is basically the sort of like presence of you where you're not like creepily hovering over them, because who's got time for that anyway, but the presence of being coached by you in that program, those things that you set in motion during that session 2 weeks ago are still front and center in their mind. That's that engagement and reminders. So those are the things where like life is kind of going up, but there's coaching activities sprinkled in, powered by CoachAccountable, things that you and or them set in motion during your session. The next piece is what I like to call benevolent stalker time. And I coded in orange. It's not quite red, but it's a little milder version of red, which is orange, which is, this is coach time and effort and energy that you have to spend, but it's optional and it's pretty quick. When I say benevolent stalker time, what I'm talking about is the opportunity for you to have this live window into how it's going. You might spend, say, like, you know, on Wednesdays from 3 to 4 p.m., I'm just going to pop through into the system and just leaf through all my clients and just kind of go through and see how's it going. You can look at their action plan and you can see what's done and what's not. You could post a little comment like, oh, geez, you haven't called your mom yet. And just give them a little love, just give them a little note, you know, on top of what things are being done and what not done, using your real-time window into how's it going. You might notice on the metrics like, oh, geez, you've really fallen out of here. So you haven't even reported in a couple of days. You skipped a few days and you're still at 0. So again, just post a little comment. There's magic in this. And to illustrate that, I want to kind of share a little story of the last coaching program I was in. It was actually a fitness and weight loss program that my wife had found. And it has you fill out a worksheet every day to report what did you eat for each of the meals and what did you do for exercise and all this stuff. Phenomenal program. I'm down 30 pounds. I'm way fitter than I was at 37. Great results, and how part of the magic of why that worked is that you knew every day when you were prompted to go in and you report on your day, there was a human being who's going to not only read it, but also comment on it. There was someone out there, not you, not your just best laid plans of intention, like, I think this is important to me. Stuff comes up where things can get washed away pretty quickly. But there's a real person who actually cares and is rooting for you and is going to see what's going on, what's happening and what's not, and offer that guidance and support. It's really the sort of accountability that is quite magic and only comes from there being some person outside of you who's kind of holding you to task. So that magic of this benevolent stalker time where you kind of look in on their thing and give them that sort of feedback loop reiterates powerfully that, oh yeah, this is worth doing. This is what I said I would do. Let me make sure that I do, versus letting it fall to the wayside as just a good idea that just, you know, I'm not so passionate about because it's not convenient right now. You can trump all of that by being that sort of presence that's, you know, kind of afar, but still kind of have finger on the pulse. And you can do this to the point of that whole, you know, coloring it orange. It's just optional, and it's empowered by this ability to just leaf through and see what's going on. A couple minutes a week for every person you do, and you've got this sort of massive presence that is supportive and carries them through that space between your sessions to actually do the work of applying the coaching. I love benevolent stalker time. It's super fun to do, and it's super fun to be the recipient of. Okay, so moving on in the cycle, we've got more life is happening. And amid that more life happening, again, hopefully they're keeping present, but with CoachAccountable's help, you've got reminders that'll help them finish strong. And by finish strong, I mean, you really want your clients to be more regularly than not coming into their sessions, having completed the lion's share of what they set out to do. If they come into their sessions having made little or no progress, it's demoralizing and gives them the sense that this isn't for me, or I'm not cut out for this, or it wasn't that important, or you're not working for me, this isn't working. Finishing strong and coming in with a sense of completion and a lot of things done and metrics moving in the right direction makes all the difference, because what's their perception then? They feel like, oh, I'm getting real movement. I'm getting real traction. I can see the results. I don't have this, you know, growing to-do list. Instead, I've got a shrinking one, that it feels good. Participating in this coaching with you feels good. That's what you want them to have, because everyone wins. You win as a coach because you are being successful, and they win as a client because they're getting what they came for. So those reminders are key. Again, you want to set them up, or again, have them sort of take ownership to set themselves up, so that that little tap on the shoulder takes all the insights from here, you know, and has them carry through and be like, oh yeah, I got to do that because I'm going to be talking fairly soon to my coach. The next thing is the pre-session worksheet. So like the post-session worksheet, you can have a worksheet that goes out automatically on schedule before your session. And if you look at the CoachAccountable one that's preloaded in your account, you kind of get the idea of this is your opportunity for your clients to sort of get connected to, like, oh yeah, I get to talk to you soon. Well, what are you excited about? What do you want to talk about? In the subtext is, hey, do you have everything ready to talk so you're coming in strong? This lets them get excited. This lets them reflect on it. And it gives you a real window into, well, what do they want to talk about? This saves precious time on the call so that you can do less of the weather report where they basically are, there's a tendency to sort of, gloss over or round up how it went anyway, and get a sort of more real finger on the pulse of it, and objectively so. So they're not sort of in that bias of like, well, I'm talking to my coach, let me make sure I look good, because we've all got a tendency to want to look good and maybe gloss over some things that weren't smooth. A pre-session check-in is a nice little offline way that there's low pressure, they can reflect and not in the heat of the conversation. So the client does it, and then it gets emailed to you just like the post-session, and then coach can take a little time and read it. And that reading it, again, is that very valuable part of one's preparation to know where they're at and to know what they're keen to talk about or to know what they're struggling with. You can craft those pre-session worksheet questions to address all those things and give it in a style. And to Peter's earlier point about we don't want to make our clients work hard, you can design that worksheet so that it's nice and tidy and succinct, and set their expectations up front, like, hey, please take no more than 5 minutes. Let them know you're not asking them to do a lot of work here, but just a little bit of reflection goes an awful long way. Any questions about pre-session worksheet? You guys are silent today. I hope it's all landing. All right. Next up, appointment reminders. Again, when you configure appointments, you can set reminders at the right intervals for you and your clients. My personal favorite and preference is clients get a reminder 1 day in advance. That might be redundant to the pre-session worksheet if you do that 1 day in advance as well. And then half hour in advance, sort of like, hey, last call, get your stuff together, mark whatever's done, finish what you can so that you can come in strong and know yourself as effective. And then I get a reminder via email 10 minutes before, or actually text, and then an email or a text 1 minute before, which says like, okay, time to wrap up. The 10 minutes is perfect because that's time for coach prep and review. And as you guys probably know, coach prep and review for a session is super easy when you've teed things up in CoachAccountable per this whole cycle. You've set things in motion like an action plan, you've created metrics that are worth doing, and you've got session notes that you can easily review. So back in CoachAccountable, if I were to get that text say, hey, you're talking to Claire Client in 10 minutes, I'm like, great, what do we got here? Do some good stuff, metrics, oh dear, this fell out. Okay, I'll be sure to talk to her about that. Action items, okay, some things done, only one thing late, some good stuff got done since last time, great. Session notes, what did we talk about? Oh yes, here we go. I remember writing this, and I won't get my wires crossed with the other dozen clients I'm working with. I know exactly where they're at. And then reading their pre-session worksheet, again, delivered via email, or can look at it here, you can see like, yep, that's what we talked about. So I'm good. I'm with a few minutes, super prepared, clear about where they're at exactly up to the minute. I don't have to spend a lot of time with a weather report. I come in looking like a genius because I know exactly where they've been struggling and where they haven't, and we can hit the ground running in that session. And that's the full cycle. So let's see, a couple more slides in here. There's a little color coding, coach effort is in red. Of course, we're always going to do the actual cycle, and you probably are already in the habit of typing up some form of notes, even if it's just for yourself, perhaps to share. And certainly you do some prep and review. With just a little bit extra work around here and setting things in motion powerfully, we got a lot of automatic stuff that CoachAccountable is helping to support your clients and have them do the work and get the results they came for so that they come in strong for the next session. And incidentally, again, like I said, this whole part around here, the space between your sessions, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is their opportunity to actually apply the coaching. Because if they just feel good and are inspired during your session and nothing happens between now and your next session, you can only have so many sessions of that before they get the experience that this isn't working for them. So supporting them during that time to actually map that coaching onto their lives and do that work is the real win here. So a couple ideas that I want to share about Cadence. Like I said, there's that tendency to have a rhythm of, we speak every week, every 2 weeks, once a month. You can have it be regular like that, and this all works very well. But incidentally, you can also be a coach who's more of the style of like on demand, or you know, we kind of figure it out as we go. This all still works because again, when you schedule an appointment, if you set those pre and post worksheets, they'll just go at whatever rhythm you want relative to those dates. And then again, any worksheets or action items and metrics and worksheet assignments that you assign will again be relative to when they got created. So it all just kind of works. There's another thing that you can do here that's kind of fun as a structure. You're going to have, or at least I'm kind of, again, my opinionated view of coaching is you'll probably have some sort of cadence, regular or otherwise, but it behooves you to think about doing longer arcs. So in addition to the regular cycle, you might have rituals of, you know, a quarterly check-in. And there's a worksheet that I created that I think is really cool, and I'll make it so you guys can grab it yourself, where you want to let them evaluate the bigger picture. And so I made this one called Last Quarter in Review. And it's a really great way that sort of bootstraps perfectly on all this created structure in the regular cycle and cadence to reflect on the bigger picture. You know, what kind of things have you learned? What are your favorite insights? You know, go review your session notes as I've typed them up with you and shared with you for the last 3 months, every week or every 2 weeks or every 1 month. And pick out your favorite ones. You're doing something called, again, active recall. If you invite them to look back on their treasure trove of session notes, they will get to value that treasure trove of session notes as worth reviewing and see all the good things like, oh yeah, that was 2 months ago, but I remember that and that was very useful. Re-presenting them and bringing them up gives a lot more sort of value. Again, it's that second and again, or another and varied exposure to similar ideas that helps them sink in and become part of the DNA and how they roll. That's that lasting change thing that coaching is always seeking to make.
So, John, I got a quick question.
Yeah, man.
And it, you know, it's kind of a weird question, but personally as a coach, I have a challenge with writing session notes because I'm so focused and listening that if I'm typing notes, even afterwards, I don't remember all the detail.
Yeah.
You know, so at the times if I'm doing Zoom, I record the session and with their permission, of course, and upload it to their record. I know this is a very kind of weird, nebulous question, but are there any other tools that you're aware of that could assist with that? Tracking content from a coaching session?
That's not a weird question at all. That's actually a really great one, because what you're talking about is the work of putting those session notes together might not be your thing. And indeed, it's more work too, especially, Robert, if you're going the route of recording it. You then have to rewatch it and then take those notes and da-da-da. And like I said, one of the big goals that I have for you guys is that you can give your clients a lot more without doing a lot more work yourself. So there are actually a number of strategies to deal with exactly what you're talking about. One of them is coaches, and this is a totally acceptable way to do it too, will say to their clients, you type up your session notes and share them with me. Do it as a journal entry or as a worksheet. Your post-session worksheet can be that assignment for your clients. Type them up yourself and then share them, and I will reflect back what I see and sort of add any sort of things that I recall is missing. So you can kind of outsource that to them. You can also go very minimalist. To your point about, you know, you're so focused with listening at the time that you can't really type. My personal style, and I recommend this for all coaches, is don't take session notes during your session, because you're right, you want to stay fully present and with them. You might scribble just some loose ones and then flesh them out and embellish them and maybe make the occasional like hook for you to remember. But doing after is great. And that's why, again, I say, do it quickly after you hang up the phone call. Like I said, I like to take 5, maybe 10 minutes right then while the conversation's still fresh. And then I can, again, type up, you know, as succinct as possible, but just something. You know, you don't have to go full on. You can go less and then just, you know, get it out quickly. So those are kind of various strategies you can kind of mix and match from to get over, like, again, that it might not be your thing, or it could be a lot of work.
Yeah, okay.
Either way, though, you can be designing that repository of information that makes it like a nice last quarter check-in for the longer arc, a really powerful thing for people to explore and remember back to.
Yeah, I like the idea of expanding my post-session worksheet a little bit and have that be the session notes that I respond to.
Yeah.
So,
and again, like we saw, you know, they can type up their first draft, and then you can just hit reply and, you know, add basically whatever you'd like to put on the mix.
Yeah,
And then that'll
some
post
great
it as a
suggestions
comment.
coming up on chat too about services that people use to transcribe. That's awesome.
Uh,
All right, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. The next section that I put in this is, what you've completed. Again, setting this in motion and doing it per the regular weekly or monthly cadence builds a really nice record. So, prompt your clients, go visit your actions for the last one, see all the things you got done over the last 3 months, and pick out which ones you thought were more significant, and think about why. Active recall has them value and really reappreciate what they've gotten out of working with you, things that they probably would not have accomplished outside of your relationship. And then finally, the third section, the third section is what you've gotten into. That's, again, inviting them to review their metrics. If metrics are part of what you coach people on, have them go to their past metrics, or just review the whole story and graph from some of the key ones and see, and let them weigh in for themselves. Are you pleased with this? How do you feel about your progress? What do you notice in terms of trends or habits or patterns of when did it really work? When did the needle really move in the right direction? Or what things, cause stagnation? And then finally, I end this worksheet with a, overall satisfaction and looking forward, where, again, in that longer arc, you wouldn't want to tax someone with asking this question every single week. But in the longer arc, it could be really fun to just have them check in. Tell me where you're happy. Tell me where you're not. I'm really interested to know. And then what should we create going forward? It's a really nice way to, again, give them opportunities to participate. It's not too much work, but it'll have them sort of going through those archives that have been sort of captured and growing through the normal course of events in CoachAccountable, and give them that appreciation of the bigger picture and how things are going. Final point about this, about Cadence, a little bit about getting in and getting out powerfully. These are topics unto themselves, but how do you get someone into this rhythm? There's a number of ways to sign people up. They can come through your usual channels or purchase an offering. You can use things like an onboarding course to starter kit, set things up. But you yourself as coach want to sort of communicate to them in their first session, here's the rhythm of how we're going to do things. We're going to, always make action plans. We're going to track some key metrics, and we're going to always review on how it went and course correct as we need to, and have time to acknowledge and celebrate wins and correct, falling behinds. So that's getting in, teeing up that expectation and letting them sort of know and understand how that rhythm will work. And then when it comes to getting out powerfully, when it's time to wrap up the coaching engagement, you've got a couple of things. An exit sort of form that might be in a similar format to that one that I just showed, where it's like, where are you happy, where you're not, what do you see going forward? And then of course the client export, the great souvenir of all these things that, again, just accumulate over the normal course of events. You can download the whole record and say, it was great working with you. Here's your file to enjoy and take forth as a souvenir and trove of insights. And anytime you want to pick up with me, let me know, we can work together again. And there we have it. That's the whole session cycle. So you've got your actual sessions, which, is, again, so much the focus of coach training, but there's an awful lot that you can provide before, during, and after the times of that session. Actually, before and after, in between, I need to say. All right, everyone. And that is Mastering the Session Cycle. Thanks for tuning in.